New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and you are watching The Inclusive Church. Where we talk about what it takes to be a stained glass spirit community, spiritual community where oneness does not require sameness. I'm so excited is not quite the right word, but it's the only word that's coming to mind. So I'm excited about what I'm going to share with you today. It is a Toolkit Tuesday, where on Toolkit Tuesdays, I try to share some information with you that you can have in your toolkit, tools, ideas, resources that you can actually use. And I try to keep Toolkit Tuesdays to 30-ish minutes, so that you can get some valuable information and then jump right back into your day. We've had a few of these in a row, and coming up, starting next week, there'll be a few with featured guests. And when I'm conversing with featured guests, we usually go more like 50 minutes. So Toolkit Tuesday today, and you already probably saw the focus is what are 4 common landmines. And landmine seems a little violent, but that's the phrase that came to mind when I was thinking about these tips. A few weeks ago, I did a customized session for a group of ministers in the northwest part of Northwest Pacific part of the United States, and we were talking about some common challenges that ministers or other leaders in spiritual communities have when they are starting off with a real intentional focus on inclusion or beginning to really go to the next level. And as I thought more and more about this, I was like, I want to flesh this out a little bit. And so over the next few months, I'm going to flesh it out. It's probably going to turn into a full chapter in the next book, The Inclusive Church. But 4 things that people do. So if you are, I see several people watching on YouTube and Facebook, 2, 3 different Facebook pages. So I just want to invite you to say hello, tell me where you're dialing in from if I don't already know. We've got Wayne checking in, and I'm not sure if the world needs more Tracy Brown, but that sure makes me smile, Wayne. So, okay, 4 landmines. So what is a landmine? Right? Landmines in a simplified version are, you're walking across a field and you step on a landmine and it explodes or blows up, right? Or it creates an explosion, and typically there's some injury involved. And so we try to avoid the landmines and recognize where they are and what they look like. And that's what I want you to do with these 4 common landmines that I'm going to share with you today. So you've made a commitment to really be inclusive in your spiritual community, or you've made a commitment that your spiritual community is going to be an example and a catalyst for greater inclusion in the community. And one of the biggest landmines is actually often right before this happens. And sometimes when the community is pushing for inclusion, but the leader is kind of leaning away from it, the first one is denial. Like denial that all the ways that we're different from one another actually do impact who we are, how we show up, what programs and services we offer, how we engage people, what examples we use in our talks or in our programs, who we market to, how we market. This whole idea of denial. And it happens a lot in New Thought communities, especially because there is a fallback of we teach and we believe in oneness. And because we believe in oneness, we are not going to talk about the ways we're different from one another. We don't need to acknowledge the ways that we're different from one another. And that whole denial piece of that differences make a difference and inappropriately falling into oneness means we're all the same. That is one of the biggest landmines. Teaching or preaching or including in classes the idea that oneness means we're all the same. That's not what we teach. We may teach that oneness means that we all come from the same source. We may teach oneness means that each of us is unique and we are a representation of the one source of all life, and therefore we are all connected. But teaching oneness means we're all the same is not appropriate and then creates a big, big problem when you want to be more inclusive or when you want to begin to guide your community into conversations about inclusion. So the first landmine is denial. Denial that differences do make a difference. Number 2, focusing your activities on or being motivated by discrimination. Now, some of you would be like, well, that doesn't make sense, right? Being inclusive means we want to end discrimination and its effects. That is true. However, when you design everything that you're doing around fixing a problem, you are still driving attention to the problem, not your vision of what the community or what the world would look like once discrimination is eliminated. The other problem with focusing your activities and your comments and your examples in your talks about discrimination is that you are again directing people's attention to the negative aspects of the fact that we are different from one another instead of the positive aspects that we are different from one another and that those differences are by divine design. Some of you have heard me talk about divine design quite a lot in this context, right? If I believe that the creator of all of life doesn't make mistakes and has created human life in so many different hues, colors, interests, to operate and to live successfully in so many different climates and environments, and for individuals to have different skills and interests and talents, then how can I say that that's bad or that that's a problem? So the problem may be that in our human interactions, we make human-based choices in order to achieve power or recognition or control. But if I am in a spiritual community, intentionally helping people to understand that diversity is a divine idea and it's beautiful, then I want to be careful about why, when I'm describing why we are doing something or when I'm suggesting what we might do. I don't want to focus that, and I don't want to focus the majority of those conversations on, for example, racism is a problem and it's our job to fix racism. Now, I can feel some eyebrows going up. Yes, in our human experience, racism is a problem. Yes, in our human experience, we absolutely want to eliminate or replace the consciousness that allows racism to exist. But if I am talking to people in my spiritual community, I am approaching that from the perspective of we are committed to be an example of love in the world. And where love is not being expressed, we are going to bring more love. And we are going to move in such a way that the consciousness to support discrimination can no longer exist because we are moving toward the vision and our values that are related to love or harmony or unity. When you do the opposite and you say, we're all about love, and so we're going to fight discrimination, and we are going to make sure that the political system changes, and so you have to go out and join me at this protest, then you're approaching it from the human condition, from the politics. You want to guide people based on spiritual principle, why this is important to pay attention to, and then ask them to choose what of many dozens or hundreds of ways they could be engaged in breaking down the consciousness that leads to behaviors that result in this human condition. So this is true beyond race or racism. It's true with sexism. It's true with homophobia. It's true with age discrimination or difficult conversations between people or groups of different generations. It's true for all the ways that we are different from one another. And the diversity, the ways we're different from one another are not bad. But yes, we want to change our behavior and our beliefs around the idea that diversity is bad. And because we're doing that in the context of New Thought spiritual communities, then we want to use our spiritual principles. We want to create a vision that pulls people into action, not pushes people into action from the point of pain, especially pain created by human thought and human choice and human policy. So I hope this makes sense. It's very important that you don't slip into the same conversation that people are hearing on the news, right? You don't want to be reacting and using the same language and the same terms that are used in the political context initially, right? Or you want to be able to build a bridge between that language of politics, humanity, and legislation and the language that is the language of spirituality and love and our spiritual principles. So that is what leads to landmine number 3, which is our languaging and our definitions. I was leading a workshop last year, about a year ago, and it was so fascinating because one of the participants in the workshop brought up, we were looking at definitions of different words, and one of the participants raised her hand, and I called on her, and she said, "Yeah, Tracy, I love these words, but you left out this word and this word and this word." And I asked her, so why were those 3 words in particular important to her in the conversation that we were having about race and racism? And she proceeded to define the words and why she thought they were important, which is what I asked her to do. And that led to a great conversation because the language that she was using, 2 of the 3 words were not related specifically to racism. They were related to other kinds of discrimination. So those were kind of easy because we talked about, for that workshop on that day, we were only using words that were directly related to race-based hatred and violence or racially motivated discrimination. So that was okay. There were still some other words. And then the third word was related to racism, but it was a word that's used in politics, in social movements, in social organizing, community organizing. And there's nothing wrong with the word. And it was important to define it. But the conversation turned out to be so beautiful because we were able to have the conversation in real time, not just me and her, but with the entire group, about how tricky it is to use language that people hear in the news without defining it and without building a bridge to the spiritual principles or values that we have agreed together are so important. And so it was a beautiful conversation because it's like, yeah, we purposely didn't choose to introduce that phrase or that term because we know when people hear it, it will be a trigger for them to take sides politically. And we can use it once we've determined some common ground for our motivation and why we're talking about the subject. But even then, we have to introduce it in, hey, you probably have heard this phrase, and then you want to do some activity or some conversation that takes the edge off the word without weakening the meaning, but the emotional edge, the reaction, and frame it in a way that allows people to see, oh, this is what the conversation is about. But the reason it's important is because I'm committed to harmony or beauty or love or unity, etc. So the definitions that we use, often we use the political definitions or the definitions because some of us have gone through community organizing, and it is the right language for organizing people in the general community, neighborhood, state, country for political action. Let me say that again. It is the appropriate and right and very powerful language that those of us who've been trained in community organizing or political action, right? It's the right language to move people into political action. In our spiritual communities, our job is to drive people into spiritually guided action. spiritually grounded action. So if we're going to use words, especially words that have been charged by emotional or confrontational meanings in the general public or in the general media, then we have to take responsibility for using them in a way that still allows our spiritual communities to be motivated from a spiritual action perspective. So those are 3 of the 4 landmines that I'm going to share with you, right? Number 1 was denial, operating or trying to motivate people to be spiritual while denying that differences make a difference. Landmine number 2, really being overly motivated or being centering our efforts and our teaching on discrimination, which often will lead to anger or fear, instead of centering it from a place of spiritual principle and practice, which leads to courage and integrity as well as action. And landmine number 3, definitions, being really conscious and intentional about the definitions you use, and when using terms that are used in the general public, being sure to define them and link them to the spiritual motivation for the work that you are doing to be more inclusive. The 4th landmine is defensiveness. Now, I was thinking about this, and often, really, this is the trajectory that someone who is a leader in a spiritual community, who has taken on or been assigned the responsibility for creating awareness about diversity or developing some passion about being inclusive in our spiritual community. Often this actually is the sequence that it happens. You know, there's some resistance or hesitancy about that is based on denial, that oneness means sameness. And then it's like, okay, we're going to do this. And the world needs us. And like Jesus, we can be the saviors of the universe because we're going to fight all of these bad things and we are going to make a difference and make them go away really by like force. And we keep people riled up around the problem instead of engaged with being the spiritual solution. And as long as there's the problem, that's where the passion comes in. We've got passion to fight this problem. I want our spiritual communities to have passion about living in alignment with spiritual principle. I want our leaders and our congregants and our participants in programs to be excited about the impact that they can have in the world by being an example of a new thought metaphysician applying spiritual principle to the human condition in their individual lives and in the life that we share together. And then the landmine of definitions, forgetting that we're not engaging people or trying to motivate people with what they hear every day in the news, the debates, the confrontation, the power and control. We are instead trying to motivate them by understanding what different words mean and defining them in the context of you need to know this in order to move with us in this direction. And then the 4th, right, when that happens, then many leaders will then hit a new brick wall or step on another landmine, and that is the landmine of defensiveness. But I've done all the right things. I have really good intention. We need to eliminate discrimination, and I've been really careful to define words in the context of our spiritual belief system, and then someone criticizes them, or someone doesn't get on board with what they're saying, or someone has a different idea, and the inexperienced leader will, the inexperienced leader related to inclusion will get defensive. I didn't mean that. Oh, well, but I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Oh, wait. I don't know. What I've read tells me that this is the definition and this is the way it should be. And so I did my homework, right? It's defensive. It's always about defending what I've done or what I've said or why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that defensiveness often comes because as leaders in our spiritual communities, we're so used to being right, especially if we're talking about something we've studied, right? If we're talking about spiritual principle or principle of our New Thought movement, right? We've studied a long time, and we believe people expect us to be right. And so instead of hearing the feedback and asking for more, we're uncomfortable that we might not be right. And so we get defensive. And the person who is really experienced in dealing with diversity and with inclusion from a spiritual perspective, it's not that they won't ever get defensive, because all of that's a human quality. It can happen, but they will get defensive less. And I mean, I've experienced this myself. I can get defensive, but often what will happen is I'll feel, right, my breathing gets shallow, or I'll feel a little anxious, or I'll hear my thoughts wanting to jump in and respond and say, oh, no, 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 that's not what I meant. Instead, now I've trained myself to notice those little cues, then take a deep breath and say, wow, I thank you for giving me that feedback. Or, oh, hmm, tell me more. Or, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Tell me more why that made you uncomfortable. Make sure I understand so I'm able to apply it differently, or so I won't use that word in the future, or so that I can relate to people who think about it differently than I do, right? Be curious and get more information so that you understand why someone is telling you either that word was inappropriate, or they just disagree with you, or they have a different perception or a different perspective, how to think about that or how to approach that, or they have a new idea they want you to try on. You have to get more information, not just react to protect yourself or to make yourself right. So those are the 4 landmines, and you're going to hear more about them. And next week I will, or in a coming week, I will talk about 4 specific strategies that help you moderate or modulate those 4 landmines. But again, people who are new to or trying to take their spiritual communities focus on diversity or inclusion to the next level often step on the landmines of denial, focusing on discrimination, having inappropriate definitions or not defining things at all, and being defensive when they get feedback that's different from what they expected. So over the next week or two, just watch yourself when you're thinking about topics related to diversity and inclusion in our spiritual communities. Do you tend to lean into one or more of these 4 areas? Have you found yourself responding or reacting with one of these 4 areas? And just begin to notice. And while I want you mostly to notice yourself, I also give you permission to notice what other people are doing, what other leaders in your spiritual community or in your denomination, how they are handling these challenges. Because if we know, once we know these are landmines, then we can begin to replace the landmines with something that is safer, something that will actually help you lead yourself and your community into a more positive, helpful, and productive approach to inclusion. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so glad that you joined in today. It was a Toolkit Tuesday, but the Inclusive Church is here every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. And I hope that you will join us again. See you soon.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.